Today's story was written by Reddit user In Yellow Clad. History tells of a time when our world faced a great and terrible evil. Many might simplify this by calling it something utterly generic, like the rise of the Demon King/Queen, or the Scourge, when in reality it was far more complicated. That's not to say there was no Demon King, or Scourge for that matter, but the threat was more than just either of those things. It began with a creeping corruption, or so the scrolls say, a blight upon the land that twisted our beautiful world into some form of hellish wasteland, a vile thing of creeping flesh and pus, of gnashing teeth and scrabbling claw. That was only the start. We should have known this. It was easy at first to handle. We found, even in our fledgling state, we elves, dwarves, and the other elder races were fully capable of fighting this corruption, even containing it. But as time passed, this corruption grew and learned. It began to strategize, to think critically about its next move. We did not know it, but it came from another world, another realm to be more precise. It had crept through a fissure in reality, oozing through like a pestilent sludge, fleeing something worse. Regardless of its origins though, it was evolving, and we knew not what awaited us. See, we grew complacent. We thought we could win, and so relaxed, our efforts lessening as we took our time to come up with some method of total eradication. That only served to let the corruption gain strength, to test our weaknesses and exploit them with a subtlety not even our greatest spies could have matched. In time, the corruption became almost myth, locked away, our attention turned elsewhere. It turned inward, and old grudges reared their ugly heads. So consumed with our petty disagreements that we failed to notice when one of our most revered heroes went missing, simply up and vanishing. We did not know they had ventured into the quarantine zone, that they had decided they would end the threat of the corruption themselves and fallen as a result. We did not know they had been remade and reborn as something cruel and hell-bent on conquest. When the attack came upon the walls of the mighty fortresses that blocked the growth of the corruption, it was swift and so well executed that no runner managed to flee to warn the others of what was coming for them. They were lost within days, and soon the other fortresses followed, one by one, till nothing stood in our foe's path to challenge them. It flowed across the land like a terrible plague, an all-consuming sickness that had no counter. And then the proclamation came from our enemy, a call for subservience and rebirth. The great Nephinadeivurus, slayer of dragons and giants, had fallen and been reborn as Zareka the Defiler. Her reveal was enough to throw the world into even deeper chaos, to dash the hopes of all. And yet there were countless adventurers who rose to the challenge, attempting to slay the Dark Queen, and yet each of them fell, just as she had, and joined her ranks, serving her without hesitation and showing no mercy to her foes. We thought it hopeless, that our world was doomed, our very way of life expunged. But then refugees began spreading rumours of seeing something new fighting the Dark Queen's forces, speaking of great metal golems tearing through the monstrous beasts she commanded, that they used weapons of great and terrible magic, that metal things flew around in the sky and rained death upon their enemies. Of course, our leaders dismissed such claims, till we all saw it with our own eyes. It was a great and terrible battle, one of the last, and we were losing. Our forces were just beginning to rout when the first shot came from the sky. It fell upon the enemy like an arrow from the gods, and the ground shuddered under its impact. And then came the metal birds, the great beasts with talons of fire as they screamed across the sky, raking the ground with death and fiery death. But the great metal dragon that followed was something to behold. It had no wings, only a great body bristling with spikes all over. It roared, the sound deafening as it split the air, and from its spikes came destruction in two forms. Great booms and explosions tore up the ground beneath our enemies' feet, sending their mangled corpses flying in every direction. But that wasn't all. The great metal dragon dropped its own eggs upon the battlefield, each one impacting hard and splitting open to unleash creatures of metal and magic. Many did not use swords like we did, but carried strange weapons that spat fire at the beasts of HFY, blowing limbs and armour off in equal measure. They seemed unstoppable, unrelenting, and our forces stopped to witness the spectacle. But in an hour, the beasts lay dead and the golems returned to their eggs, which magically sealed up and returned to the great metal dragon. We knew not what had happened, but it would not be the last time we saw them. Countless battles were fought, each one with the aid of this great dragon, who we beseeched with prayer and adulations to lend its strength to our honourable cause. It never spoke to us, but it never turned on us either. It was the eve of winter when the final battle came. With the dragon's help, we had pushed HFY's forces back to her fortress, cleansed the corruption thoroughly wherever it may be found, and prepared for the final assault. And it was here we learned that the great dragon had more surprises in store for us, for her. Instead of just the golems we had been fighting alongside, we all bore witness to the introduction of great walking beasts, whose backs bore the weight of a mighty weapon. It moved ponderously, much like a turtle might, but for all its slowness, it was a terrible beast of war indeed. Its magic reached great distances, and upon impact, it shattered fortifications like they were made of little more than glass. As the beasts advanced, so too did the golems, and from the sky came more of those metal birds. But the most startling thing was the appearance of yet more dragons, who disgorged their young into the fray and sought to bring an end to our most hated enemy. One in particular, a golem which wielded a blazing sword and who seemed to direct the other golems, met the Dark Queen face to face. Her magics would not work upon it. Only the attacks of the physical domain could hope to defeat it. But though her strikes were brutal and terrifying, the golem stood firm. The battle was fierce, their strikes sure and devastating, but in the end, the golem was struck down, a great talon through its chest. Most startling though was the discovery that it could bleed. A rich red lifeblood spilled from the wound. HFY gloated, professing her victory before the magic which animated this golem had even fully fled it. It was her undoing. With one last great effort, the golem raised its mighty blade and sank it deep into her vile heart. With a scream so piercing it shattered the windows of homes miles away. The dark energies which gave her life were released. Golem and mortal alike fled, racing the destruction her death brought. But it was over. It was done. We needn't fear any longer. We praised the great dragons that had come to our aid, offered them the riches of our realms, but they did not accept. Their task was done, the corruption cleansed, and so they vanished without a word, but not before collecting what was theirs. Thousands of years have passed since that fateful day. Though the scrolls are held in high regard, many do not believe such aid came to us. Instead, many believe that it was we who were solely responsible for the Dark Queen's demise. But I, Muriel Shirley, believe it to be true. That everything happened precisely as the scrolls said they did, and I will find the proof of this. In ancient times, the site of the final battle was rife with magical hazards. So deadly, in fact, that the entire area was sealed off to prevent the civilian populace from accidentally or intentionally killing themselves. The magical wards remain, but I am a royal historian, and so my credentials should allow me to pass unmolested. It's a risk for sure, one that could quite possibly lead to my death, but it's a risk I'm more than willing to take. As I stepped up to the mighty and very visible magical barriers, my pointed ears quivered with anticipation, and I stepped forwards, feeling the slightest of tingles against the tip of my nose as I passed through the barrier with ease. My hunch about royal credentials holding up, I closed my eyes, waiting for the inevitable painful death that awaited me, and yet it didn't come. Instead of death, I found life. A few thousand years has a way of burying things and encouraging other things to grow over that which was buried. Such was the case here. This great battleground, supposedly scarred and pitted by the great magics of the dragons and their strange offspring, was now little more than a field of softly rolling hills covered with flowers. At a glance, nobody would ever think a battle had taken place, that countless lives had been snuffed out, or that their blood had soaked the earth for days on end. Luckily for me, I fancied myself as something of an archaeologist, so this would pose no issue to me at all. I spent weeks digging, searching for any sort of sign of the battle that had taken place, and all I found was nothing but dirt. Dirt and more dirt. My patience began to wear thin, till one day my shovel struck something that was certainly not dirt. My heart raced, and I dug feverishly with my bare hands. Fear that somehow my shovel might damage whatever it was that I found. And oh, what a find it was! It was some sort of door made of metal, with strange markings upon its front. The door was slightly ajar. Old plant growth had forced it open at some point, and that was perfect for me, as I used the shovel to leverage the door open further. Beyond it was a dark passage, one so dark that even my superior elvish eyesight could not pierce. It called to me, and I answered, venturing down into the darkness, my bag bouncing off my hip and a torch in my hand. It descended for what felt like miles, down stairs of metal, the walls and ceilings the same as the floor. Nothing but metal. I saw more of those strange markings, knowing for a fact that they must have been words, but their meaning eluded me. And then the passage levelled out, and I stepped into a great cavern. It was there that I found my proof. At the cavern's centre sat a citadel of flesh and bone, the former desiccated and long rotten. Around my feet lay the bones of the dead. Elf, dwarf, halfling, orc, it mattered not. Bones were bones, and they had all died fighting. I even spotted the remains of golems and their crawling beasts. The metal birds lay strewn in pieces here and there, but what really sold it was the bones of the beasts that had served Zurekai. Many were shattered and broken, others clearly having killed their foes even as they died, their bodies mingling with the others. I walked through the battlefield, recording everything I saw in a fresh journal. It was all so much, to walk amongst my ancestors and see their struggles with my very own eyes. But something caught my eye, a structure that was not like the citadel. It was like the passage I had passed through, made of metal and bearing those same markings. As much as I wished to explore the dead citadel, I went to this other structure first. It was alive still, or so it seemed. It hummed softly and the doors opened for me upon approach. Within it was considerably dusty, but then again I expected that. Not like anyone had been down here to clean in the last 1,000 years after all. I found bodies, strange ones. Their bones were much like an elf's, yet they seemed as sturdy as the bones of a dwarf. The similarities were something to record, and the old but still well-preserved clothing was strange too. Yet another thing to make note of. As I passed some sort of pedestal, it lit up with magic, and a figure appeared. A woman with dark skin. An elf? I was ecstatic at first as I looked upon this elf made of light and magic, but then I noticed her ears. They were rounded, not long and pointed like my own. This was confusing, but then she spoke and the language she used was unlike anything I had ever heard before, which only cemented the fact that she was not elvish. She spoke at great length, and though I did not understand her, I was enraptured. Now and then she would raise a hand, an image painted with such exquisite attention to detail appearing. She showed me things, thousands of the great dragons flying through a dark void filled with twinkling lights, facing down the very same corruption they had fought here. But there was something different about it. The corruption had forms much like their own, great dragons of flesh and bone that spit acids and barbs where the metal dragons unleashed fire. The battles were more vicious than any we had experienced, and I felt myself grow pale at the thought of the war these dragons, these people must have waged against the corruption. In time, the woman finished her tale, and her tone grew sincere. She said something, motioning towards a pedestal before me. From it slid a strange disc of metal and glass, and she seemingly beseeched me to take it. So I did, taking the tiny disc and placing it in my bag. And that was it. Whatever life had remained in this structure now fled, and the room grew dark as she faded from existence. Now it was time to explore the citadel, and to think on what little I had learned. I strode the ruined halls of the great fortress, the source of the corruption. Even here I found the remains of valiant warriors locked in battle. It did not take me long to reach the central chamber, and I found the great hero itself. It was like I stood there at the very moment it happened. Its metal body gleamed. The sword still crackled with energy, and it was embedded firmly in the chest of the Dark Queen, who stood rigid, desiccated, but very much dead, her lips twisted into a snarl of anger and agony. I felt the need to kneel before the hero, the slayer of corruption, but I resisted. Instead, walking up to them both and getting a closer look, not even a speck of dust lay upon the hero, whose chest had been run through by a claw of considerable size. From the wound, I could see the dark stains of blood, or something similar. I took so many sketches of the scene, taking note of every little detail, marking, or curiosity that caught my eye. I knew many would not believe me if I did not bring some form of truth, and so I pondered what else besides the disc I should bring with me. My gaze settled upon the sword, still firmly gripped in strong metal hands. Yes, that would do. Oh so carefully, I relinquished the hero's grip upon the hilt, and when the last digit uncurled, the weight of the blade made itself known. The form of Zorekai turned to dust as the sword fell to the ground with a resounding clang. Picking it up proved to be a trifle more difficult than I had been expecting, but thankfully the magic which had flowed along the blade was no longer present. Within the week I had finished documenting my find and returned home to the capital, where I was to present myself to the king and the other historians. I could not wait to see the look on the naysayers' faces when I presented proof. The night before my audience was to take place, I held the disc in my palm, looking it over and searching for a way to use my mana to turn it on, to activate the enchantments it held. Nothing I did worked, and so I went to return it to my bag, only to feel something scrape against my skin and draw blood. I thought perhaps I had just caught myself on some sharp edge, so I paid it little attention beyond tending to the small cut. Morning came quickly, and I now find myself before His Majesty and the historians, many of which look unhappy to be here. I'd show them, then I would have the satisfaction of seeing their jealousy. Your Majesty, honoured peers, I have found the site of the final battle as it was written in the ancient scrolls and histories of our peoples, I announce, and the king looks intrigued, but I hear the soft snorts of derision from my peers. And I take it you have proof of this, yes? The king spoke, the others rolling their eyes. "Certainly, my king. My first item as proof is this," and I hoist the heavy sword off my back, wrapped up in thick cloth to preserve it. Going down on one knee, I lay it over my thigh and unwrap it, revealing the gleaming silver blade and the winged guard. The blade shimmers and the room goes quiet. My peers are suddenly taking this more seriously, I see. I present the blade which felled Zerekai, taken from the very hand of the golem which slew her. I rise and approach the king, presenting the blade to him. He takes it, marvelling at the weight and size of it, as well as the exquisite artistry. "My second item as proof of my claims is this," and I reveal the disc. My peers lean forward, trying to get a better look. I grin and am about to hand it to the king, even as he hands the sword over to the others when something jolts me. It felt like a brief static shock, and as a result I lose control of the disc, watching it tumble to the ground in slow motion. Even as I scramble to grab it, I know I will not be able to. But instead of shattering upon impact, it snapped itself flat to the ground and began to glow in a pulsing manner. Before, the very same woman appeared before us. She faces the king and the historians, smiling in that pleasant manner of hers. But when she speaks, I know something has changed. She speaks in our tongue, and we all learn of the terrible war that was fought in a realm beyond our own. Of the Thetarth, who was the corruption we had faced, an alien species bent on consuming all things. Of the Terran Empire, who had stood against them till the enemy had been driven from their void-born shores. And then of their discovery that the enemy was not truly defeated, but had fled to our world. We learned of their campaign to save us all, the might of their armies brought to bear one last time. We learned of the rift between our worlds which had been bridged, a bridge which would not last forever. Our great war had ended, and the Terrans returned to their realm just as the bridge fell, separating us once more. But that was not all. Just as she reached the end of her tale, she said something that gave me hope for the future. "We may be separated by the barriers raised between dimensions, but know this, we will not stop trying to reach you, to learn about you, and to help you grow to your fullest potential. Already, our greatest minds are building a portal to provide a stable bridge between our worlds, but it cannot work without a counterpart on your side. Enclosed within this device are the plans for your part of the bridge. We do not expect you to complete it immediately, or perhaps ever, but should you, we will be waiting. Should that day come, know that humanity will welcome you with open arms and open hearts. For now, however, know that humanity is proud to have fought and bled at your side. Till we meet again, friends."